Welcome back to Definitely Not Definitive. I'm Ken.
And I'm Bethany.
And we're just a deadly duo in love that loves reacting to some Dead by Daylight.
We're a deadly duo. I feel like I need to do that. I feel like there we go. Yeah.
There you
exactly.
go.
Like we need to,
I don't want to leave you hanging.
Thank you. It's like we need to reenact the Mr. and Mrs. Smith movie cover. Like that's just deadly duo. It's like that's...
Okay, all right. I guess that's what I have to do now every single time. Bethany has decreed it. And every single time we do Dead by Daylight, we have to have our killer hookup drinks. This is the killer hookup. It's our homemade sangria. It's one of the few franchises on our channel that has a signature drink. So cheers to all you Dead by Daylight fans.
Cheers!
We're actually diving into some lore for Dead by Daylight for the first time. We've checked out some killer trailers and some Maury's, and we've done some spotlight trailers. We got to do more of those. Those are coming. But we wanted to get in some lore. So this is the lore for the Blight. That's Go check it out, see how it is.
I love some good lore.
Well, hello there, friends and foes, survivors and killers. We sit around the campfire together and talk about Dead by Daylight. Specifically, the newest chapter, Descend Beyond. That time of writing is currently on the PTB. If you hop on, you can explore both the new killer known as the Blight and his
occupation crackhead scientist.
Richter. As someone who mostly plays killer,
oh my God.
I find Dead by Daylight's expanding cast of murderers and madmen to be the more compelling half of the roster. I'm far more interested in the Blight than I am in Felix. Don't get me wrong, I like Felix a lot for reasons. The reason this chapter has earned my attention. But I want to say here, I'm not talking about his perks or his abilities or how he's actually quite a bit taller than his camera angle would have you think. Because frankly, I'm not good enough at the game to talk about that competently. I've been playing on and off for a couple of years, but I still only have 200 hours on the game and I peaked at rank 4. If you want a Blight guide, I'd recommend you find someone better at Dead by Daylight than me. Instead, I'm here to talk about something a little bit more abstract. And what makes me really drawn to the Blight is a point of discussion. The Blight is Dead by Daylight's first ever lore killer. And that's a really big statement, so I'm going to go over what I mean by that. The Blight has been a character on the periphery of the story for a little while. Despite him only coming out now, his presence has been foreshadowed for about 2 years. Speculation about him really picking up around October 2019, when he was featured in the first ever Archives release as the subject of Tome 1 Awakening. Notably, neither the name of the Blight nor his birth name, Talbot Grimes, were ever actually featured in these archive entries. Instead, the character described is actually called the Alchemist. In the entries, a few hallmarks of the Alchemist character shone through that have made it through to the Blight. A killer who tormented survivors in the trials, an unethical chemist who experiments on human subjects, and an addict to pustular serum. The pustular serum and the pustular petals used to make it were the core of the Withering Blight event that was going on at the same time as the Awakening Tome came out, as well as in the Hallowed Blight event in October of the previous year. Whether this was intended at the time of these events or not, I don't know, because I don't know behaviour schedules for chapter releases, or how long the Blight in his current state has been in the oven, so to speak.
Easy Blight oven.
Name and turn his origin story directly into the Hallowed Blight was a very neat move by the design team behind the Blight. It would have been very easy just to call him the Alchemist, but making him feel like part of the Hallowed Blight brought into the main game showed us that these events aren't just fun little side quests, but substantial parts of the game that demand our attention. This goes with his addiction to pustular too. He injects himself with the same putrid serum survivors collected during the Blight events. This is why I like the Blight so much. It's not just an addition to the game, but an organic part of it. But what I would consider the centerpiece of behaviour written lore here is what makes the Blight the first proper lore killer. He's the only killer in the game who has had absolutely confirmed canonical interactions with the other killers in the realm of the entity. In the second memory of the Alchemist's archive, he is confirmed to have experimented on none other than Herman Carter himself, the Doctor. This confirms that the killers don't just exist in their own little bubbles when the entity is not using them in trials, but instead have some level of personal freedom within the realm of the entity, and share a wider world in which they can coexist and interact. This has never been outright confirmed before, only jokingly alluded to by the developers shipping the Wraith from the nurse. This isn't a one-off either. One of his add-ons is a vial of the Plague's bile he uses in a concoction, and the Hallowed and Withering Blight skin lines show the effect of the pustular serum on several of the other killers he presumably experimented on, including both the Doctor and the Plague. Some people have suggested that this element of the story is no longer canon, since the
somewhere else, another world.
The part of the clip suggests that the Doctor and the Blight interacted in the regular world before being taken by the entity, which would make no sense, since Talbot Grimes was a Scottish chemist in the 19th century, while Herman Carter was an American doctor in the 60s and 70s. For these people, I would draw your attention to the first line of the first memory.
He moves through the death and decay of the void.
When the narrator is describing Talbot's memories of another world, Talbot himself is in the void. The
somewhere else
is the realm of the entity, not the real world. The Alchemist story takes place before he becomes the Blight, as the serum-chugging, speed-running crackhead we see in the game today. Look, this is all getting quite confusing, so I'm just going to summarise the full lore of the Blight right here, right now, using all the knowledge and revelations that we've had so far. Okay? Let's go. Talbot Grimes' life on Earth was spent in the employ of the British East India Company during one of the Opium Wars in China. Frustratingly, behaviour doesn't actually tell us which of the Opium Wars he was part of, but fortunately I'm a clever clog, so I figured it out. The Opium Wars were between 1839 and 1842, and later 1856 to 1860. The British East India Company was actually dissolved in 1847. Those operations on Dyer Island would have to have taken place during the First Opium War, so between 1839 and 1842. This is when he was doing his experiments on prisoners of war, like a certain someone else we all know and love. By the way, Dyer Island, it's not anywhere near India, it's in Bermuda, just in case you were interested. The entity took him from the opium den he wound up in and brought him into the fog, where his experiments continued. Before long, these lovely fellas and fellarettes wound up with a nice new makeover at the Pustular Boutique. At this point, I'd be comfortable with him being referred to as the Alchemist, since his primary motivation seems to be curiosity and general mad science shit, instead of addiction to the pustular serum itself. Eventually, the entity sent him to the Void, where the dried out and soulless husks of spent survivors are left to fade away. Perhaps this implies that Talbot was a survivor, who used the strength the pustular petals gave him to turn the tables on the killers, but we really don't know that for sure. Whatever happened to him, he found pustular flowers in the Void, which he used to make his serum and regain his strength, and came back to the entity's realm in full grip of addiction to that serum. Talbot Grimes made a promise that day. He swore away service to the entity in exchange for access to the serum he so craved. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the Blight we see today. And that's more or less it, frankly. I really hope you can see now why I value the Blight's addition to the cast so highly. It's a sign from behaviour that they're really willing to take the lore of their game seriously and try and actually build a well-crafted world out of all the pieces they've got going on, and I really do value that commitment. I still have a couple of questions about the Blight, mostly about how this mad addicted chemist idea translates into the game, and questions about Talbot Grimes' existence that open up who Vigo might be. But they're not really holes in the Blight's lore itself, so I'm just going to leave them be for now. Maybe in the future, when we learn more about Vigo, I'll take another look at him to really get to the bottom of those mysteries. But for now, I'm happy to wrap things up here.
Okay, so that was our first little taste of the lore there. Some of it, like in the beginning, was kind of more like why he liked the Blight and why he thought that the Blight was an important killer, and then like towards the end, just got a little bit got what the actual lore was. So, what'd you think?
I liked learning about the lore of this character. This video probably could have been shorter than it was, to actually cover specifically the lore itself, and then, anything else is a little bit extraneous, unless you're like a diehard follower of what he likes and follows for that reason. Yeah. I thought the lore was very interesting, and it's one of those things where I love the creativity of an original character. I love the lore with some historical roots, the East India Trading Company, the Opium Wars, and, let's face it, there are very few things more terrifying than like a mad scientist doctor.
Yeah.
So that was just it was all very chilling to hear about him running experiments on people and make the skin crawl a little bit.
It was interesting how he had a little bit of a crossover with the other doctor that's in Dead by Daylight, and that seems they said they might have like more crossover with other killers as well, like more interactions. But those two seem to be the most closely linked, and I find it interesting that they kind of like put the two doctors, like one's a scientist and then one's like a doctor or a surgeon or whatever. It's interesting that they kind of put those two together.
Well, and the plague too. It's a crossover with because theoretically, it's his experiments on that character that possibly created the plague. So that would be interesting. It kind of makes me want to go back now and watch the plague video to see when they talked about her backstory. If there was any allusion to this character, to see like how much is Dead by Daylight really making some of these storylines cohesive, or are we as fans kind of seeing what we want to see?
Yeah. It's a kind of a Five Nights at Freddy's thing where the community's kind of piecing together the lore itself, and or is it really like they have this like concrete plan that they have to go forward with like all the different characters and how they all are going to come together. Maybe like they had it all planned out and they know how it's all going to come and tie together and whatnot. So that would be cool.
I mean, I kind of hope it's the latter where there's crossover between the original characters, because maybe I'm a product of the times and all the franchise films that we all watch, but there's that part of me that's going like, yeah, if they had like this master plan where they cross over and there's some interaction or whatever, like you could create a whole film franchise out of this and a TV show about Dead by Daylight.
She's thinking about the money. She's thinking how to capitalize on all this.
I'm thinking big, you know, let's make it big.
Yeah.
But I also just love the creativity of having something that's like, you know, we're not just going to create a mad scientist just to create a mad scientist, but we're really going to give him a backstory and a history and something that, you know, makes it real to us as the audience.
Because it's easy just to kind of like create a character that's like scary looking, that's freaky, and like give them some kind of like crazy powers or whatever, and not really have that much of a backstory to them. And it's different also if they all have like a connection. So they have these characters planned out, and they're like, okay, this is how they're all going to interact, and this is how it's all going to kind of, I don't know, come together for a nice, cool story. But
and don't get me wrong, like it's fun to see the celebrity killers, I guess, that we're all familiar with, like the Michael Myers and the Chainsaw Massacre, and that's fun because they're already celebrities. But part of the appeal is that we're invested in them from the stories about them that we know. So if Dead by Daylight really puts in the time to create the stories for their characters, I think it would be really fun to uncover those. They'll be new to us as audience members, so it will be really kind of thrilling to get a taste of that.
Yeah, and if you enjoyed this video, we also got the link down below in the description of this video, so you can check out more lore videos. And if you have other channels that you recommend for lore videos to check out, let us know that. So, you know, we can kind of like mix and match and see which, you know, different channels, like, we do the same thing kind of for 40K. We like to check out different channels and try to see, like, you know, which sort of lore master is, you know, jives with us the most, or which videos we like. Yeah, and we also have a playlist down below in the description of this video for all of our Dead by Daylight videos, so you should go ahead and check those out. You've seen our reaction for Dead by Daylight, the Blight's lore, but just keep in mind
Our reaction is definitely not definitive.